Are we ready to begin?
Yes, Bante.
Okay, wonderful. So, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, good day, wherever you might be. We take a few minutes to ask any questions you might be having. So, if you have any questions concerning the practice that we went over this morning, please feel free to raise your hand or write your comments in the box. Just make sure they're practical questions and concise questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So, it will take about 10 minutes or so for questions, and then we can go into a period of practice. So I see Majid has his hand raised. So you can unmute yourself and put your hand down.
Good afternoon, Bante.
Good afternoon.
When you do the 32 organ parts, do you visualize them as you go through them?
Yes, you can visualize them. Might not be the most perfect visualization of them. It's almost more of a, if you have a very vivid imagination, you can use that that imagery in your mind to see the organs. Just as Bante was posting the pictures, it gives us a more visual idea of what these organs look like. So you have that. If you have a very visual imagination, you can use the imagery of it, or more of a sense of what the organs are, acknowledging those organs, And as you practice more and more of this practice, the image might become more visual instead of just a sense of it.
My second question, and the last question, when you do the whole body scanning, I feel sometimes I get stuck at some point and I cannot move down. Should I start up again, or what should I do?
I say probably just try your best. Don't just keep on working at it and working at it. Don't, just have that, just develop patience and calm when you get to those little hurdles. And hopefully it breaks up and you can bypass it more easily. Or say maybe just try another place and then come back to that area.
Okay, can I just go back on the top and start scanning down again?
I think that's okay. Just starting. There's no harm in starting all over again. You're not losing anything. You're not. It's the patience and calm and acceptance of, okay, I'm blocked right here, but it'll change in time. The more I practice, the more wholesome qualities I develop while I'm doing the practice. The concentration, the mindfulness, the patience, the equanimity, all those positive states of mind will just strengthen your ability, and the blockage won't be a blockage anymore.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I got a question in the box. When I do walking meditation, I find myself paying attention distracted by those micro adjustments of the muscles in my toes and feet to maintain my balance. Can you address this? I don't think this is necessarily, it's, if you just take it as a distraction, you find it something that's bothersome, that it's, I don't think that's the best angle to go about doing it. I think just having that awareness of all those little muscle tensions and little pressure points that go into the walking practice is just helps you be more mindful. It helps you, see all those, what goes into walking. So I don't think they're necessarily a bad thing. I think maybe we need to adjust our attitude to those little things as well. If you just see them as distractions, as bothersome, then, you're just, they're going to be distractions. But to just take them as, okay, I am aware of this, those micro adjustments, that muscle tension, in the foot or whatever, it's just awareness, it's mindfulness, so work with them, just as I just said, Majid, patience and equanimity and the mindfulness that goes into these things, those attitudes of the mind make the difference. Don't see them as issues, don't see them as interfering with your meditation, because those kinds of attitudes just make more problems. Okay, you're welcome. So, any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand, write your comments in the box, and I'll try my best to answer. Geeta, what's your question?
Okay. Thank you, Bhante Mangala, for teaching us.
You're welcome, Geeta.
Thank you. I have a question for you. Is the main reason for body contemplation is to see anatta, anicca, anatta, dukkha? Like everything is impermanent. Like our body parts are aging every second of every single day. And eventually they're going to start failing. So we're going to see old age coming up. So would this, in a greater, bigger picture, lead towards anicca, anatta, dukkha? Because it's all suffering and there's absolutely nothing we can hold on to because there's no self here. So would this help us in the Noble Eightfold Path towards our goal of Nibbana?
Well, of course, it's a teaching of the Buddha, and all the teachings of the Buddha are leading to that direction. So I think it was Bhante that said this morning that this practice is good for samatha because it's repetitive and it's very focused, and but it's also good for anatta. I think in the commentarial tradition, it's usually taught as a samatha practice, but yeah, by analyzing and seeing that this form of ours, this being of ours, is all these parts that are working 24/7, 365 days a year from the time of conception, never stopping, never ceasing. So where's this being? Where's this I? Where's this me that we put so much emphasis on, And
exactly,
so that's kind of, it's one of those things where it's functioning as, it helps lead to samatha, leads to concentration, but I think as we go deeper and deeper into it, insight will eventually come where we see this form, this being is anicca, dukkha, anatta, because the parts, everything is changing, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Okay, let's see, we got some questions. Is it okay to not bring up unattractiveness of the body parts to the mind, but to think also healthy and happy for body parts? So there's two questions. Is it okay to bring up unattractiveness of the body parts to the mind, but to think they are also healthy and happy? I think whether they're healthy or happy, it's just, if you don't want to use the word unattractiveness, you just want to, I say, don't necessarily paint them up as healthy organs. Just see them as organs, just see them as parts. It's, the goal of this practice is not to try to put a concept onto them as like healthy or happy. They're parts. So whether they're healthy or they're sick, their nature is always the same, that these are just organs. They have a function, they have a purpose, so on and so forth. So don't worry about putting healthy and happy on them. Just go through the parts as Bhante did this morning, and that should be enough. The second question is, for body parts that I can't feel or visualize, is it okay to just use the word and know that I have that part in my body? Or is feeling, visualizing each body part required? No, just acknowledging them, having a visual, not a perfect visualization, but just to be that, like I said earlier, just having that sense that this organ is in the body, it's there. There should be plenty. And as you get more familiar with it, then a better visualization or sense of it can arise. Another question, when doing walking meditation, I find the lifting stage of one foot overlapping with pressing of the other foot. Is that okay, or should I just adjust so that they don't overlap things? I just say, be mindful of what foot you're on. So the foot that you're lifting up try to not focus on the other one. It's not going to be always perfect. Don't try to micromanage it and make it a mechanical movement. Just make it as natural as possible, but keeping your awareness on the foot that you're raising at that time. You need both feet on the ground to be able to stand. So just try to work with just keeping the focus, your mindfulness on the foot that you're working with. Another question, do we need to follow the exact order of the 30 parts of the body during the sitting meditation? I say go with the order in which it's presented. There is some method to the madness. So as I stick with that list. Okay, I think this is going to be the last question, so we get into the practice. So Min Wang.
Thank you, PQ Mangala, for teaching us. And I have a question. The purpose we contemplate the body parts to reduce the sense of desire thing. But I'm thinking the surgeon deal with body part every single day. I don't think they, have the purpose to reduce, sensual desire. So what is the thing behind this practice help reduce sensual desire?
So a surgeon who works with bodily organs, or a mortician in a coroner's office, I think they see everything. They see what is this body. They're aware of this body. Yeah. So I'm sure they're very desensitized to this idea of attractiveness or lust for the body, but they're always looking at the external. They don't make it internal. They don't, maybe don't necessarily see that these bodies that they're working on is the same as their body. It's always just an intellectual, external thing that they're focusing on. And also that we're all not surgeons, we're all not morticians, so we need to work on ourselves. So not so much focus on these hypothetical surgeons and morticians, but yeah, we do have to work at it. We need to. It has a purpose.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, one more question. Thank you. Okay. So let's get into our practice. So get into a congenial position for meditation. So we'll pick up with the contemplation of the 32 parts of the body, as we've done in the morning. Bringing our awareness to our breathing. And bring awareness to the sitting, feeling the body placed as it is right now, taking the body in its totality. In this body, there's head hairs. Head hairs. In this body, there's body hairs. Facial hair, arm hair, leg hair, body hair. There is nails, nails of the fingers, nails of the toes, nails. There's teeth, both rows of teeth in the mouth. And there's skin from the top of the head down to the soles of the feet. There's skin. Now in reverse order, there's skin, there's skin, there's teeth, there's teeth, there's nails, nails, there's hairs of the body, hairs of the body, there's hairs of the head, hairs of the head, Now in downward order, hairs of the head, hairs of the head, hairs of the body, hairs of the body, nails, fingernails, toenails, nails, teeth, teeth, skin, skin, okay, on to the next grouping. Flesh. In this body, there is flesh underneath the skin, covering the whole body. Flesh, flesh, sinews, sinews, bones, bones, holding the whole body upright. Bone marrow, bone marrow, now in reverse order. Bone marrow, bone marrow, inside the bones, 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 sinews, sinews, flesh, flesh, downward order, flesh, flesh, sinews, sinews, bones, bones, bone marrow, bone marrow, now for the organs. In this body, there is kidneys, kidneys, right kidney, left kidney, kidneys, kidneys, heart, heart, is in the chest, pumping blood throughout the whole body, heart, heart, liver, liver, diaphragm, diaphragm, spleen, spleen, lungs, lungs, right lung, left lung, and reverse order, lungs, lungs, spleen, spleen, diaphragm, diaphragm, liver, liver, heart, heart, kidneys, kidneys. Now descending order again. Kidneys, kidneys, heart, heart, liver, liver, diaphragm, diaphragm, spleen, spleen, lungs, lungs, the next section. In this body, there is intestines, large intestine, small intestine, small intestine coiled into itself, large intestine surrounding it. In this body, there is intestines, the small and the large. Mesentery, mesentery, holding the intestine to the back wall of the body. Mesentery, mesentery. Stomach, stomach, the balloon in the abdomen, stomach, stomach, feces, feces, brain, brain, reverse order, brain, brain. Feces, feces. Stomach, stomach. Mesentery, mesentery. Intestines, intestines. Small and the large. Now in forward order. Intestines, intestines. Mesentery, mesentery. Stomach, stomach. Feces, feces. Brain, brain. Now we get into the liquid components of the body. In this body, there is bile, bile. Phlegm, phlegm. Pus, pus. Blood, blood. Sweat, sweat. Fat, fat. In reverse order. Fat, fat. Sweat, sweat. Blood, blood. Pus, pus. Phlegm, phlegm. Bile, bile. Now in forward order. Bile, bile. Phlegm, phlegm. Pus, pus. blood, blood. Sweat, sweat. Fat, fat. Now to the next grouping. In this body, there's tears, tears, tears in the eyes, tears, tears. Skin grease, skin grease. Saliva, saliva. Nasal mucus, nasal mucus. Fluid of the joints, fluid of the joints. Urine, urine. In reverse order. In this body, there is urine, urine. Fluid of the joints, fluid of the joints. Nasal mucus, nasal mucus. Saliva, saliva. Skin grease, skin grease. Tears, tears. Now in forward order. Tears, tears. Skin grease, skin grease. Saliva, saliva. Nasal mucus, nasal mucus. Fluid of the joints, fluid of the joints. Urine, urine. All these constituents of the body are in this body. From the top of the head to the soles of the feet, bound in skin, are these constituents of the body. Now, let's direct our attention back to the top of the head. In this body, there's head hairs, head hairs. Body hairs, body hairs. Arm hair, facial hair, chest hair, pubic hair, body hairs. Nails, toenails, fingernails, nails, nails. Teeth, teeth. Skin, skin. On the top of the hair to the sole of the feet, there's skin, skin. Now in reverse order, skin, skin. Teeth, teeth. Nails, nails. Hairs of the body, hairs of the body. Head hairs, head hairs. And forward order, head hairs, head hairs. Hairs of the body, hairs of the body. Nails, nails. Teeth, teeth. Skin, skin. In this body, there is flesh, flesh. Sinews, sinews. Bones, bones. Bone marrow, bone marrow. Bone marrow, bone marrow. Bones, bones. Sinews, sinews. Flesh, flesh. Flesh, flesh. Sinews, sinews, bones, bones, bone marrow, bone marrow. In this body, there's kidneys, kidneys, heart, heart, liver, liver, diaphragm, diaphragm, spleen, spleen, lungs, 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 spleen, spleen, diaphragm, diaphragm, liver, liver, heart, heart, kidneys, 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 heart, heart, liver, liver, diaphragm, diaphragm, spleen, spleen, lungs, lungs, in this body, there is intestines, large intestine, small intestine, intestines, intestines. Mesentery, mesentery, stomach, stomach, feces, feces, brain, 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 feces, feces, stomach, stomach, mesentery, mesentery, intestines, 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 mesentery, mesentery, stomach, stomach, feces, feces, brain, brain, now onto liquid components of the body. In this body, there is bile, bile, phlegm, phlegm, pus, pus, blood, blood, sweat, sweat, fat, 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 sweat, sweat, blood, blood, pus, pus, phlegm, phlegm, bile, 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 phlegm, phlegm, pus, pus, blood, blood, sweat, sweat, fat, fat. In this body, there's tears, tears, skin grease, skin grease, saliva, saliva, nasal mucus, nasal mucus, fluid of the joints, fluid of the joints, urine, 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 fluid of the joints, fluid of the joints, nasal mucus, nasal mucus, saliva, saliva, skin grease, skin grease, tears, tears. In this body, there is tears, tears, skin grease, skin grease, saliva, saliva, nasal mucus, nasal mucus, fluid of the joints, fluid of the joints, urine, urine. These 32 contingent, these 32 parts of the body make up this body. From the top of the head, the soles of the feet, bound by skin. Take a few moments and see the body in its totality with its 32 parts. Not focusing on any particular part of the body, just seeing the whole body from its skin to its intestines to its fluids. Okay, good. Begin to slowly open up your eyes. Finish up our practice as we normally do, coming the palms together, doing a little forehead massage, temple massage, top of the head, back of the head, back of the neck, shoulders and shoulder blades, upper back, lower back, your buttocks, thighs and your knees, shins and calves, down to your feet. Just waking everything up. So now we can have a period of walking meditation to 3:30, and then Bhante will take over again, and I'll see you all later for the Vandana. So continue with your practice.
Thank you, Bante.
You're welcome.
Testing, 1, 2. Is it working? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all enjoying this retreat. Oh, it's a lot of hard work, but I think it was Spinoza who said that all great things are as difficult as they are, all noble things are as difficult as they are great, something like that. Okay, so now we've gone through the meditation of the 32 parts. So that is one of the trainings in the contemplation of the body. And now we'll be moving to the next phase in the contemplation of the body. And this is called the Dhatu Vavatana, the analysis of the body by way of the primary elements, by way of the material elements. And Buddhism takes over from the earlier Indian cosmology, the idea that the material world is comprised or constituted by 4 primary elements, and it uses the ancient terms earth, water, fire, and air. Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo, the old Vedic terms. But in the Buddhist thought, Buddhist way of thinking, these 4 elements represent what we might call 4 modes of matter. We can take them to correspond to the aspect of the primary material phases or states. The earth element representing the principle of solidity, the water element, the aspect of fluidity or flowing, the fire element, the aspect of heat or energy, and the air element or wind element, the aspect of motion, of expansion and contraction. And in the Buddha's way of understanding the elements, we find that these elements are present both in the external material world. We have, the solid earth, solid instances of matter. Say the cup itself is primarily earth element. The water, of course, in the cup would represent the water element. The degree of heat in the water would be the fire element, and probably the motion of the molecules would represent the air element or wind element. But according to the Buddha, all 4 elements are present simultaneously in every instance of matter. So the difference in the state of a particular material substance is just determined by the preponderance of one element or the other. So in something that we call solid or hard, the earth element is predominant, but even in a block of stone, it will be present to some extent the water element. There'll be present this block of stone will have some degree of heat, so that will be the fire element. And even though the block of stone seems to be solid and unmoving, but at the level of particles, there'll be motion in the particles. That would be the presence of the air element. Okay, so now when we do the contemplation of the body, what we are going to be doing is looking for the presence of the four elements in turn through the body. And we're going to focus on each of the elements in terms of their predominant characteristic, predominant quality. And so the earth element, the predominant quality of the earth element is that of hardness or solidity. We might say even that there's a kind of spectrum or continuum between hardness and softness, and both are aspects of the earth element. But the sort of more prominent characteristic of the earth element is that of hardness, solidity, by which any kind of material substance occupies space and resists compression. So hardness, solidity to represent the earth element. Okay, the fire element is represented by the property of heat, which we'll be able to experience in the body. So there can be actually a continuum or spectrum between hotness and coldness. So those two would be the poles of the fire element, and we'll be looking to find the heat within the body. The air element represents the principle of motion, expansion, and contraction, which we're going to find in the body. And the water element is a bit peculiar, the way it's explained in the commentarial text. It's said that the water element has the principle of cohesion, of binding together, of sticking together. So that particular material phenomenon, which is responsible for material particles to bind together, to stick together, that is the activity or function of the water element. Perhaps the early commentators based this stipulation, this position, on the experience of making the chapati or roti, the flatbread, the Indian flatbread. You take the flour, the wheat flour, you put it out on a, what do you call this? A slab on a board. And then when you have the wheat flour just by itself, if a wind comes along, a breeze comes along, it can blow the flour away. But to make the chapati, what you do is to mix water. You sprinkle water over the wheat flour, and then you knead it together, and then the wheat flour holds together. And so it's the water element that is binding together the particles of the wheat flour so that one can make the dough that will then be heated into the chapati, the flatbread. Okay, so now we are going to begin with the earth element. Today, in this session, we're going to focus on the earth element, because the earth element is said to be the basis or foundation for all four elements. And what we're going to do is to try to locate the earth element in the body. And so we're going to start off by finding a clear representative of the earth element in the body, to pick up the sensation of hardness or solidity in the body, and then use that initial sensation of hardness or solidity for exploring the body, scanning the body to see that hardness or solidity can be detected everywhere throughout the body. And so let us start now, actually get into the practice. by taking the sitting position. And this will be a guided meditation. And now we've already done, yesterday we did pretty much all day the mindfulness of the body in the sitting posture. And so we begin by simply bringing to mind the body in the sitting position. And you can do some scans through the body. You don't have to enumerate each of the sections of the body. You don't have to go like head, face, neck, shoulders, and so on. But just as you're sitting, you could scan the body a few times at a moderate pace, not the extremely slow pace, but just to get familiar with the body in the sitting position. Okay, now we're going to look for some concrete object that clearly presents the quality of hardness or solidity. This you have to sort of experiment and find within yourself something that you could really dig into for the experience of hardness or solidity. And you could move around for this, while in the sitting position. You don't have to remain sort of completely immobile. Some examples to get the sense of hardness would be with the teeth. You could clack the teeth together. grind the jaws together a little bit. Or the upper part of the skull. You could even use your hand and knock it or rub it to get a feeling of hardness or solidity. Or the jawbone. Yeah, you could use your hands to sort of knead it and touch it and press it. Could be the elbows. Or the knees. Even you could rub the knees to get that sense of hardness or solidity. Okay, so now you have an impression of hardness or solidity. And now what you want to do is to do a slow scan of the body, again going from the head down, looking for the sense of hardness or solidity. In this, you don't have to designate or name the particular parts of the body. You don't have to be thinking, this is the head, my cheeks, my lips, my neck, my chin, my neck. But just move the attention, the mindfulness down through the body, looking for that sense of hardness, solidity, material resistance. And again, it's a matter of whatever you pick up. Don't be disappointed, disillusioned if you come to big blank areas. But you're just trying to find, sensate, sensory experiences of hardness or solidity wherever they manifest in the body. Okay, so now run through this on your own now. You can go at a fairly slow pace. But don't get fixated if you run across blanks, thinking I have to get this feeling of solidity there. If you attend to an area and it doesn't appear, just move on to the next. And keep on doing this over and over at a fairly moderate pace. Not too slow, not quickly. Looking for the sensory experience or feeling of solidity, hardness, this material substance in the body. Okay, continue now on your own. If it's hazy, vague, unclear, the sense of hardness, then go back to the original areas that you could, in which you could clearly pick up the perception of solidity or hardness. Focus on that area or several areas for a while until the sense of hardness becomes clearer and sharper, and then return to the general comprehensive body scan. And if you find it helpful, you could use the mental note, hardness, hardness, or solid, solid. When you finish one scan, then go back to the top and again scan down at whatever pace you find comfortable. After a number of scans, what you can do is spread the mindfulness over the entire body, focusing on the entire body as earth element. So you're getting the whole body simultaneously, perceiving it by way of the earth element. So you could do that for a few minutes. Then when that attention starts to get blurry, then you go back to the scans. So you alternate the scanning by way of the earth element and then the full body awareness simultaneously by way of the earth element. Okay, you can relax now, and according to the schedule, it's time you could fuel the earth element with a little bit of the liquid element. So until 4:30 is the time for the break. And then at 4:30, then we will have a Dharma talk. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it's time for the evening or late afternoon Dhamma talk, and I'll begin with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I was thinking just earlier today that on the first day of the retreat, in my evening Dhamma talk, I spoke about how it's crucial in practicing the way of mindfulness to develop the mind of renunciation. And the way one develops the mind of renunciation is by seeing past or seeing through the enjoyment of worldly pleasures and seeing their inherent drawback, their danger, the adinava. And then yesterday, Bhante Mangala in his talk spoke about how the Buddha undertook his act of renunciation by seeking an outlet from old age, sickness, and death. Then this morning in the afternoon, we spoke about the impure, unattractive nature of the body seen by way of 32 constituents. And I was thinking to myself, oh heavens, these poor people who might be relatively new to Buddhism are going to come away with this impression that what a dark, dismal, negative, bleak teaching this is. And yet, if you have personal acquaintance with long-term practicing Buddhists, you see almost always they have a big smile on their face and radiate a kind of inner happiness and joy. So I thought I should maybe shift gears a bit and speak a bit, not dwell too much on suffering, but speak about the other side of Buddhism, which is the way, Buddhism as a way to happiness. And in a way, in fact, what the Buddha did in the history of Indian spirituality was to effect a kind of radical transformation or a kind of fundamental switch in the direction of Indian spirituality. Because in the Buddha's time, among the contemplatives and seekers, the dominant view was that, first I'll use the Pali expression, dukkena sukhang adigantabhang. Happiness is to be attained through suffering or through pain. And so because of that belief, the kind of dominant practice amongst many of the renunciants was the practice of what is called tapas, which means affliction, personal affliction or self-mortification. And so we could read, in fact, Venerable Mangala gave a little overview of some of the practices that the future Buddha, the Bodhisattva, undertook during his quest for enlightenment. For a period, he was pursuing that belief, and he subjected himself to all of the most extreme types of self-affliction, self-mortification that were being practiced by the ascetics of that period, and found that they didn't lead to the goal that he was seeking. And so what the Buddha did was to, through his childhood recollection of his childhood experience of the first jhana when he was a little child, he came to understand that happiness, the ultimate happiness, is to be achieved by happiness, that the path is a pleasant path, a happy path, not a miserable path. And so sometimes when it's said that Buddhism teaches the middle way, this can lead to a misunderstanding. So you might think the middle way means that you avoid, on the one hand, self-mortification, inflicting suffering on oneself, and on the other hand, you avoid pleasure. You avoid anything that conduces to happiness. But that's a misunderstanding or misinterpretation. The middle path is the middle path between the indulgence in sensual pleasures, or we could say indulgence in material pleasures, and self-mortification. But the Buddha teaches a path of happiness that avoids those two extremes, and yet it's a path that unfolds through different layers or levels of happiness, culminating in the ultimate happiness. And just to illustrate this, I want to read just some verses from the Dhammapada. I mentioned the Dhammapada was during my Saturday class last week. I suggested that people who want to cultivate a deeper spiritual life, one practice they could undertake is to read a few verses from the Dhammapada every day as part of their practice, or even to read, if they have the time, even a chapter every day. Since you could read a chapter, read it out loud in 10 minutes. Okay, so there's a chapter in the Dhammapada, which I seem to have done the brilliant job of losing my place, having it marked. Here it is. Yeah, the chapter is chapter 15 and is called the chapter on happiness. And so this is starting with verse 197. It's translated, I'll just read the translation. It says, "Happy indeed we live, friendly amidst the hostile. Amid those who are hostile, we live free from hostility, free from enmity." Yeah, so this shows us one aspect of cultivating happiness, that even if people are hostile to you, aggressive, show anger and hatred towards you, it doesn't mean that you just passively have to accept it, but in your mind, you dwell free from hatred, free from hostility. And towards those who are overcome by hostility, you can develop compassion towards them. And so the first line, actually, it's not simply happy we live, but susukang, which is emphatic. Susukang vata jivama. Very happy, extremely happy we live, without enmity amidst those who are hostile. And the next verse says, "Very happy indeed we live, without affliction among those who are afflicted." And here probably by affliction means afflicted by the mental defilements, especially by craving. Amidst those who are afflicted, we dwell free from affliction. And then the next verse says, it continues along the same line, "Very happy indeed we live, without avarice among those overcome by avarice. Amid avaricious people, we dwell free from avarice." So avarice is like the inordinate, obsessive craving for wealth and possessions. And sometimes I reflect on some of these people, like, I mean, we have them especially in the United States, people who are like multi-billionaires, I'm not going to mention any names, but people who have wealth holdings of maybe $5 billion, $10 billion, even more. And it seems that they're never really satisfied with what they have. And so they have to funnel their wealth into the political process to skew the process to support politicians who are going to give them greater tax breaks and loosen up the regulations on their corporations and industries. So if you have like 5 billion, you're not satisfied with that, you want to build it up, increase to 10 billion, what are you going to do with all of that money? It just remains nothing but figures on an electronic bank account. You can't use it for anything. You could only eat, okay, 3 of the most sumptuous, most luxurious meals a day. And you could live, I mean, maybe some of them have houses in 5 different countries, but they could only live in one house at a time. And probably 3 of the houses don't get used once every 3 years. And you could have, what's the latest car? Mercedes, Rolls Royce, Jaguar? I don't know the current cars. But how many cars? Well, actually, you could own many cars, but you could only drive or ride in one at a time, but never satisfied. So maybe they live very comfortable life, but the mind is never really happy because it's overcome by avarice. But when we are free from avarice, then we could live happy amidst people who are overcome by avarice. Yeah, somebody asked if I could recommend a particular translation of the Dhammapada. I actually like this one, which is by Acharya Buddharakkhita, which you could find on the internet. It's on the website called Access to Insight. In some places it's a little free, but it has a lot of spirit to it. Okay, anyway, continuing. So we have happy, free from avarice, bestows, overcome by avarice. Then the next verse is sort of the capstone to this series. Very happy indeed we live, ye sang no nati kinchanang. Happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. Here the Buddha, of course, he's referring to himself and to the monks. What do they possess? Just robes to cover the body. And of course, they'll have monasteries in which to live, but in the course of a year, probably 8 months of the year, they are traveling across the countryside. So robes to cover the body, an alms bowl to collect the food, maybe a few other little accessories. And so happy, very happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. So this is the fruit of renunciation. One gives up all of the possessions of worldly life, but don't touch my computer or my camera. And then the next line, we shall be feeding on joy, piti bhaka bhavisama, just like the gods of streaming radiance. So according to the Buddhist cosmology, there are different levels of divine beings, different layers of the gods. And one of these gods, these are the gods pertaining to the second jhana, the gods of the second jhana level, called the Abhasara Devas, the gods of streaming radiance. And it's said that their experience is sort of constantly permeated by piti, by joy, by delight, by this kind of ecstatic bliss. And so even though we are possessing nothing, still we will be feeding on joy. So that joy is what sustains us, just the way the joy sustains the radiant gods. And so even though living the household life, one can't expect to just give up everything and just put some clothes in a little suitcase, take a bowl and go wandering through the cities or the countryside. But one of the keys to happiness suggested by this verse is to simplify one's life and try to find the happiness that comes from within rather than from external possessions. Okay, then there's another sutta which makes very interesting point. This sutta is called the Upanisa Sutta, the sutta on supporting conditions. And it occurs in the Samyutta Nikaya in the chapter on Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination. And maybe many of you are familiar with the formula of dependent origination, which goes from ignorance as a condition, leads to the sankharas, the karmic activities, volitional activities. These bring consciousness, then name and form, the six sense bases, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, existence, birth, then conditioned by birth, there is old age and death. That's the usual 12-fold formula of dependent origination. But this sutta, it's in the Samyutta Nikaya, is chapter 12, sutta number 23. It takes the series of conditions starting from ignorance as far as birth. But from birth, it doesn't go to old age and death, but rather it goes from birth, conditioned by birth, there is dukkha, there is suffering. But then it goes into a new series. This is the positive series, the series of progressive development, the series leading to liberation. And it goes from dependent or with suffering as the decisive support, the supporting condition. There is faith. So faith arises through the encounter with suffering. Because when we meet with suffering, we go searching, is there any way out from this suffering? Not just improving our material conditions. Of course, we need some degree of material stability to have an enjoyable life. But from the afflictions of the mind, the misery of the mind, is there any way that can show us any path, any teaching that can show us the way out from this suffering? We might, if you're not brought up in a Buddhist environment, you might experiment or explore different avenues of maybe psychological systems of psychological training, different systems like yoga, tai chi, physical exercises, which are good for the bodily health, and try different systems of spiritual teachings, different religions. But then when one encounters the Buddha Dharma with the clear declaration, the Four Noble Truths, showing a detailed analysis of dukkha, of suffering, showing the underlying conditions or causes, showing the state of deliverance, and a beautiful structured path to liberation, then there arises in response saddha, faith, not as blind belief, but as trust in this path, a willingness to commit oneself to this path. And then from saddha, this is the interesting thing, with faith as a supporting condition, there arises joy. So when one encounters that path that enables one to establish one's faith, And one tests the teaching in various ways. Sort of explores it, investigates it, tests it against the touchstone of one's own experience. And one sees, even though there are aspects of the teaching that lie beyond our own experience, but whatever one tests, one could see it's solid, beneficial, helpful, fruitful. So then the faith is confirmed and there arises joy. And through that joy, one applies oneself more diligently to the practice. And then from that joy, the sequence continues with joy as a supporting condition. There arises piti. Piti is that, I translated it as rapture, which maybe is too strong, but elation or delight, a kind of spiritual delight. And then through delight as a supporting condition, there arises tranquility or the calming down of the mind. Then with that tranquility as a condition, there arises sukha, which is the actual happiness or pleasure. And then with the pleasure or happiness as a condition, there occurs samadhi. The mind becomes concentrated, absorbed in samadhi. And then with samadhi as the supporting condition, there arises the knowledge and vision of things as they are, that is the insight knowledge. And then as insight knowledge is pursued to deeper and deeper levels, eventually it culminates in liberation, the liberation of the mind from the asavas, the fundamental defilements that keep us in bondage. And so when we take up the practice of meditation, you can see basically what we are aiming at, the two qualities we're aiming at is sort of the twin wings, or the two wings of the meditative practice, is samadhi and panya, concentration and wisdom or wise insight. And the supporting condition for both of these is happiness. And so we have to nurture happiness even in various ways in order to create supporting conditions for samadhi and insight. So it's not just a matter of success in the practice of just forcing oneself to practice diligently. In fact, I've heard like some Eastern or Asian Buddhist meditation masters have come to America and then they are invited to give some talks at American meditation centers. And they see the, I'm sorry for the Americans, they see the American meditators sitting very sternly, sort of struggling and striving very forcefully. And they comment that these people lack happiness. And so they're not able to succeed because they lack the supporting conditions of happiness. And so how can we nurture this happiness, give rise to stronger happiness, to serve as a supporting condition for our practice and to promote the unfolding of the mind's potentials for tranquility and insight? Yeah, well, we have to see that the factors that sort of prevent happiness from arising, or that actually steer us in the direction of a false happiness, a deluded happiness, are the defilements. So we have the root defilements of greed and hatred, and behind them is ignorance or delusion. So through our ignorance, we think we can achieve happiness by indulging greed, whether it's the greed for wealth and possessions, high status, position, praise from others, fame, whatever, or from, if we have a tendency towards anger and hatred, we think we could gain happiness by acting upon our anger and our hatred, by sticking it to the others, by making the others shed tears, like knocking down the others and getting ahead. And so we have those deluded, false ideas of happiness, which arise from delusion, and they spark the defilements, greed, hatred, conceit, and other defilements to push us down the wrong road, a kind of false road in our quest for happiness, a hazardous detour in our quest for happiness. And so the right road, the correct road for finding happiness, lies in reducing the defilements, but not only reducing the defilements, but also developing and cultivating good qualities, beautiful qualities, wholesome qualities of the mind. And there are a number of practices that one can undertake to nurture those good, wholesome qualities. One of the most fundamental in the Buddhist path is the practice of giving or generosity. In fact, if you look in the suttas, when you see the Buddha, when he encounters a group of people who have not yet been exposed to his teaching, and they come to him and inquire, can you please give us some teaching that would be appropriate for us? The Buddha always begins with dana kata, sila kata, that is, with a talk on the practice of giving and a talk on the practice of good conduct, virtuous conduct. So the practice of giving is a way of directly countering the mind's innate tendency towards greed or craving. And that greed or craving, it's sort of based upon what underlies it is this false, deceptive idea of the individual self as a real entity standing out over against others or over against the world. And so initially, sometimes we might have to make an effort to struggle inwardly to give something to help others, to benefit others. But once we push ourselves, even reluctantly, to do something to give to others, we find a kind of space opens up in the heart that brings an inflow of joy. We've done something to overcome this illusion of separation. We've in some way expressed a sense of empathy with others, identification with others, a willingness to uplift others. And that practice of giving or generosity, the kind of side effect is this inflow of joy into the mind. And that serves as a motivation for practicing more generosity, for giving more and more until one is able to give happily and freely whenever there's an occasion to give. So the practice of generosity, of giving, is one of the sources that brings joy to the mind. And another source of happiness that nurtures happiness is observing sila, the precepts. And so we have as the most fundamental code, moral code in Buddhism, are the 5 fundamental precepts, 5 wonderful precepts. And so we have the precept, first, to abstain from killing or injuring other living beings. Then the second, to abstain from stealing or misappropriating the belongings of others. Third, to abstain from sexual misconduct, from transgressions against others in regard to sexual matters. Fourth, the precept to abstain from false speech, from deliberately telling a lie, particularly the lies which bring some kind of damage to others or secure some kind of selfish benefit for ourselves. So those are the four fundamental ethical principles within the code of precepts. And then the fifth precept is not inherently ethical, but it serves as a kind of protection for the other precepts. And that is the precept to abstain from the use of intoxicating substances. So when you take these 5 precepts, it sort of marks a transformation in your conduct so that now you're acting on the principles of compassion and kindness towards others, the principle of honesty in your relations with others, the principle of fidelity in your relation to your partners and the partners of others, the principle of truthfulness in your communication with others, and maintaining a sober, clear mind. And so when you take these 5 precepts, you follow these 5 precepts, not only are you purifying your conduct, but you can use those precepts as a theme for reflection. So that is actually one of the 6 recollections that the Buddha taught. The Buddha teaches the 6 types of meditation called the 6 recollections. And one of them is the recollection of sila, recollecting the purity of one's conduct, the virtue of one's conduct, not for the purpose of patting oneself on the back and saying, what a wonderful guy I am, what a wonderful girl I am, but you reflect on how wonderful and beautiful these precepts are and how they, at least at the minimum, they are reducing the harm in the world. But beyond reducing harm, by observing these precepts, you are becoming a powerful force for good in the world. Yeah, I remember the thought had occurred to me long ago. Imagine what the world would be like if everybody, let's put aside 5 precepts, just take one precept. The first precept, no killing of other living beings, at least no killing of other human beings. If everybody were to subscribe to that precept and to really follow it, this whole world would just be transformed. Take all of those stockpiles of weapons and turn them into the metal, into plowshares, and get rid of all of the contaminants in those weapons. And we could disband the armies, turn them into armies of peace workers, and the world would be such a beautiful place. Just one precept, but if everybody were to observe 5 precepts, what a transformative aspect, what transformative impact. We don't have to think now of the idea of what if everybody were to do this, but just think, let me do this. And even though other people will be acting contrary to the precepts, killing, stealing, so on, but I'm going to make my positive impact on the world by following these precepts. Then you can reflect back, and that will give joy to the mind. And so we have giving, or the practice of generosity, the observance of the precepts, and then another source of joy is to nurture that seed of faith by reflecting on the qualities of the objects of faith. Those objects are the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so we have these formulas that we actually recite every day, or at least in the monastery we recite them every day, and on this retreat we've been reciting them. And those 3 formulas for the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha can be taken as themes for recollection. You could just do this as short meditations, calling to mind the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dharma, the qualities of the Sangha. And that, as you call those qualities to mind and reflect on them, that causes joy to arise in the mind. In fact, there are some other verses in the Dhammapada that relate to this. This is in chapter 21, the miscellaneous chapter. Okay, so we have a series of verses on happiness, also on happiness. So the first of these goes, the disciples of Gautama. Gautama, of course, is the Buddha's personal name. The disciples of Gautama ever awaken happily, who day and night constantly practice recollection of the Buddha. Literally, whose mindfulness is always directed to the Buddha. And so you don't have to be doing it throughout the day and throughout the night, but even just a short period of time when you do the morning or evening service, you could do the recollection of the qualities of the Buddha, not just reciting mechanically, but reflecting on them. And this causes joy to arise. The next verse. Those disciples of Gautama ever awaken happily, who day and night constantly practice the recollection of the Dharma. So we recollect that this Dharma is well expounded by the Blessed One. It's sanditiko, it's something directly visible. We could see it for ourselves. It's a kaliko. We put it into practice and it brings immediate benefits. It's ehipasiko. It invites investigation. It doesn't say, just accept me blindly out of faith, but it says, come and see for yourself. It's opanayako, something to be applied to ourselves. And pachatang veti tabo vinyuhi, to be realized by oneself through wisdom. So we recollect the Dhamma. Then the next verse, the disciples of Gautama ever awaken happily, who day and night practice the recollection of the Sangha. So we call to mind, this is the Aryan Sangha, call to mind the great disciples of the Buddha like Sariputta, Moggallana, Mahakassapa, the bhikkhunis like Kema, Upalavanna, Dhammadina. And so we bring them to mind, and that causes delight to arise in the mind. And then the next verse in this series relates directly to what we've been doing on this retreat. Those disciples of Gautama ever awaken happily, who day and night constantly practice mindfulness of the body. Nichang kaya gata sati, whose mindfulness is always directed to the body. And so in this retreat for the last 3 days, we've been directing our mindfulness to the body, and we still have the rest of today and tomorrow up until 5 o'clock to continue to direct our mindfulness to the body. So even though we know that we are seeking to overcome suffering, to find an outlet from the misery of old age, sickness, and death, though we recognize the danger, the drawback, the unsatisfactory nature and worldly pleasures, but also bear in mind that by this practice, we are moving towards happiness, ever greater happiness. And another verse of the Dhammapada, now I didn't mark to keep the place, Nibbanang paramang sukhang, that Nibbana is the supreme or ultimate happiness. And so through this practice, we are moving in that direction. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and I wish everybody continued diligence and success in your practice. And we'll take a little 5-minute break, and then we will have the evening chanting in which we recollect the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then we recite the sutta on loving kindness, which gives us the instructions for developing loving kindness, that mind of loving kindness, which is also a source of happiness. Okay, so let us take our break and we'll resume. You could do some bending and stretching and then come back into your seat at 5:15 Eastern Time.
Okay, are we ready to begin?
Yes, Bante.
Okay, very good. So now it's time for our evening service. As always, we can put our hands up in Anjali at the heart, the sign of respect for the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And even though we can't hear all of you chanting, I strongly encourage that everyone try to participate. Don't worry about perfect pronunciation. Just give it a try. So we'll begin with Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, go the homage of the Buddha. Homage to the Buddha. Iti piso bhagava araham samma sambuddho vija charana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro puresa dhamma sarati satta deva manusanam utto bhagavati. Namo tassa samma sambuddhassa ye cha buddha tita cha ye cha buddha anagata pachupanna cha ye buddha ahang vandami sabada nati me saranang anyang utto me saranang varang etena sacha vajena hotu me jaya mangalam uttamangena vandeham padapangsu varuttamam buddheo kalito doso buddho kamatutang mama buddhang yavani bama pariyantam saranang gacchami. Okay, homage to the Dhamma. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanaiko Pachatang Veditabo Vinyuhiti Namo Tassa Niyanika Dhammasa ye cha dhamma tita cha ye cha dhamma nagata pachupanna cha ye dhamma ahang vandami sabada nati me saranang anyam dhammo me saranang vara etena sacha vajena hotu me jaya mangalam uttamangena vandeham Dhamman Chatividang Varam Dhammeyo Kalito Doso Dhammo Kamatutang Mama Dhammang Yavani Bana Pariyantam Saranang Gacchami. Okay, homage to the Sangha. Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Nyaya patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Samichi patipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Yadidang chattari purisa yugani atta purisa bhugala. Esa bhagavato savaka sangho. Ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo anuttarang punyaketang lokasati. Namo tassa atta ariya pugala mahasangasa. Ye cha sangha tita cha ye cha sangha nagata. Pachupanna cha ye sangha ahang vandami sabada. Nati me saranang anyam sangho me saranang vara. Etena satchavajena hotu me jaya mangalam. Uttamangena vandeham sanghan jaruviruttamam. Sangheyo kalito doso sangho kamatu tang mamam. Sanghang yavani bana pariyantam saranang gacchami. Okay, homage to the three symbols. Vandami chittiyang sabbam sabbatane supatittitam saririka dhatu mahabodhim buddharupang sakalang sara. Imaya dhamma anudhamma patipattiya buddhang pujemi. Imaya dhamma anudhamma patipattiya dhammang pujemi. Imaya dhamma anudhamma patipattiya sanghang pujemi. Okay, we'll move on to Metta Sutta. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Karaniyamatta kusalena yantang santang padang abhisamecha. Saku ujucha sujucha suvacho chassa mudvanati mani. Santu sakocha suvarocha appakipcho cha sahluka vutti. Santindriyo cha nipako cha appagabbo kulesu anunigeddu. Nacha kudang samachare kinchi yena vinyu pare ubavadehu. Sukino va kemino hontu sabbe satta bhavantu sukitata. Eke tripana bhutati tasava tarava anavasesa. Digava ye mahantava majjima rasaka nukatula. Dittava ye vadita ye chadure vasandi avidure. Bhutava sambhave siva sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata. Naparo parang nikubeta nati manyeta kathanchinang kanchi. Vyaro sana patiga sanya nyanyamanyasa dukkamicheya. Matayata niyang putang ayu asa ekaputang nanurake. Evam pisababhutesu Manasang bhavare abarimana. Mettancha sabbalokasmin. Manasang bhavare abarimana. Udang adocha tiriyancha. Asambadang averang asapatang. Titancha Titancharan Sinova Sayanova Yavatassa Vigadamindu Etang Sating Aditeya Brahmametang Viharang Namahu Titinchanu Bhagama Silava Dasanena Sampanno Kame Suvineya Gedang Nahi Jatu Gabbaseyang Punareti Etena Sachavajena Sotite Hotu Sabha Etena Sachavajena Sabaruho Vinasatu Etena Sachavajena Hotu Te Jaya Mangalam Sabityo Vivajantu Sabaruho Vinasatu Mate Bhavattu antarayo sukhi digayo ko bhava. Bhavatu sabha mangalang rakhantu sabha devata. Sabha buddha nubhavena sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabha mangalang rakhantu sabha devata. Sabha dhamma nubhavena sada soti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabha mangalang rakhantu sabha devata. Sabha Sanganubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. And I'll say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah, there's a sharing of, still the sharing of the merits.
Oh,
Akasata.
oh, okay. Okay, so let's put your
You
hands
know how
back
to
up and
teach the
undulate.
demons out of their merits.
I know. Ooh. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika. Punyang tanganamoditva chiram rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika. Punyantang anamoditva chiram rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika. Punyantang anamoditva chiram rakantu mam param.
And then there's the imina punyakamina.
Okay. Imina punyakamena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hoto yavani bana pattiya idang me punyang asavakata asavakha yavahang hotu sabbaduka pamuchatu. Now sadhu sadhu. Oh, that's a thing like okay. Now sadhu sadhu sadhu. Dukkha pata.
Yeah, that we do.
Dukkha.
Yeah, no, that we do.
Yeah. Okay, so sadhu sadhu sadhu.
Yeah, then
And you,
will lead us to do the three bows to the Buddha. Then after that, we have the break from 5:35 to 7 p.m. Then 7 p.m., please return to the seat to continue the meditation. Okay, we could do the bows.
Sorry,
Half bows to the Buddha. Bow to Bande.